Welcome back, everybody. This is Tim with Little Crow Gunworks here, and this is part 5 of our 22 Nosler series. We're out at one of our local ranges. We're at 200 yards, and we're going to be testing those sweet spot loads that we discovered in part 4. If you didn't see part 4, I'll put a link to it up in the corner, and you can check that out. So we in that video we did pressure ladders with 2 different bullet weights, the 75 grain ELDM and the 80 grain ELDM, and we tested 5 different powders, and we were looking for points in the pressure ladder where the point of impact was consistent, and maybe also the velocity, and we were able to find 5 kind of sweet spots with the 75 grain ELDM and 6 with the 80 grain ELDM. So we're testing those today at 200 yards and see if they hold together once we start stretching them out. Because testing at 100 yards, when they start piling up in the same hole, it can be hard to tell anything from that when it's one ragged hole, but at 200 you start to see a little bit more of what's going on. The wind is a little bit more of a factor, and the dispersion starts to open up a little bit more, so it's easier to pick a clear standout. So we do have the phone scope with us on the Celestron Regal M2 100 ED. We're going to try to get some video of the targets. It's full sun, there's barely a cloud in the sky, and there's a lot of mirage, so I don't know how good the footage is going to be, but we'll try that and try to have you keep an eye on what's going on. If the footage isn't good, well, I guess whether it is or isn't, we're going to do a bench review afterwards to review the groups and go over what we found and pick a clear standout for further load development. So I got the lab radar set up to track our velocities, and just about ready to get started here. So we'll get shooting and see what we get. Stand by. We did clean the barrel before we're doing this testing. So after our last testing, we fired 100 rounds. So we did decide to clean the barrel. We basically just did a carbon remediation, took the carbon out, left the copper alone. Alright, troops, we're at the bench here doing a bench review. At the range, the phone scope footage through the spotter, there was a ton of mirage and it was super blurry and really hard to see. So I'm going to start thinking about what we can do to improve that, aside from maybe putting a GoPro camera downrange so we can get a little better visual without mirage. But the results overall, in my opinion, were really good considering how little load development we actually did. I'm going to try to have the results for each bullet weight on the side of the page here next to the target, so you can see the results and kind of look through for whatever interests you the most. But I'll kind of walk through them a little bit here. The first thing I would say is that to cut to the quick here, the 75 grain loads, every group was sub MOA. So again, these were at 200 yards. Minute of angle at 200 yards is like 2.094 inches, and all of these were under that. So Varget was 0.855 inches, as you see there, 0.835 of vertical, and that aggregate 0.855 is 0.41 MOA. So really good. This was a windy day, and this range that we shoot at 200 yards is probably one of the worst ranges I've seen for really switchy, unfavorable wind conditions. There's concrete barricades here and there. There's berms. There's areas where wind can kind of tunnel through across the range, and it's surrounded by trees, so wind swirls in there. Anyway, I'm not making excuses. It's just so if you see some horizontal dispersion here, I would lay that more at the feet of the fact that I was at 200 yards and it was really windy and switchy and whatever, where the vertical component, I think, is more, tells us more about the load itself. So Varget was 0.41 MOA, N540 up here in the corner. The aggregate was 1.086 with an inch of vertical. Velocity numbers were decent, not great. Same with Varget, both decent, not great. CFE 223 down here, the first charge weight 30.46 grains. Aggregate was 1.460 from here to here, just 0.70 MOA. Again, velocity numbers were not stellar. I'd call them average. Then the second charge weight of CFE 223 right here had a lot of vertical, and the aggregate was 1.856, and the vertical is 1.816. So that was 0.89 MOA. It's still sub MOA, even though it doesn't look that great. But remember, this is 200 yards, and these are 1-inch squares. And then Superformance in this CFE charge, again, velocity numbers were very average. Same with Superformance, velocity numbers were very average. But this one looks like it was really trying to shoot, and then got that one outlier, and that could have been me. I don't think it was, but there is some human influence in this. I'm not perfect, but if I pull shots, I try to indicate them, which I typically don't pull many shots. But even with that, the aggregate was 1.725 from here to here, or 0.82 MOA. And loads like this, where it looks like they're trying to group, but then you get one that comes out. I just released a video, a little short 5-minute video. I recommend you watch it. I'll link it up in the corner here, about how you can try to tune that out with seating depth. So again, as a reminder, we're just at 7 thousandths jump, just a generic spot that I picked to start initial testing. We haven't changed that seating depth at all. But something like this, you could test different seating depths incrementally and see if you can tune out that flyer. Because if you could tune that out, that's a really good group. I'd say that's an incredible group, because then you're getting in the just over half-inch neighborhood, which is under quarter MOA with wind. We consider that's, you're getting into competitive bench rest type numbers if you're shooting around a half-inch at 200 yards for 5 shots. That's considered a really good group if you're a professional bench rest competitor on a windy day. So what else? I think that's basically the summary of the 75 grainers. There weren't any that really stood out for velocity metrics. And as I showed in video 2 at 640 yards, that doesn't mean they won't shoot necessarily. It's just you're inviting more opportunity for vertical dispersion if the velocity numbers are really bad. So if you can eliminate that variable, I try to usually. But if this flyer wasn't here and this group was something like that, or like this Varget, that might be worth testing at 640 yards to see how it holds together and see if it warrants more tuning or tweaking. And it really depends on what your expectations are. Like some people, if they shot a group like that at 200 yards, that might be the best group of their life at 200 yards. It depends on what your expectations are and what your individual goals are. So now I'm going to pan over to the 80s, go through that a little bit, and discuss those results. And I'll try to have the results right next to the target. Much like when we did the initial pressure ladders at 100 yards in the last video, I would say the 80s kind of won the day as far as overall group sizes, and there were some good loads with good velocity metrics in here too. So we'll start with in the upper left with the IMR 4895 charge. That one, the aggregate was 1.680 inches from here to here. Again, looks like it was kind of trying to shoot, but it's not happy about something here. So that one might be able to tune with seating depth.
The velocity metrics were decent, much like the Varget on the 75 grain. Standard deviation was 9.9, extreme spread was 27, so average to decent. Overall group size 0.80 MOA, 1 inch of vertical. Varget, this was the standout for the day. Not a whole lot of horizontal here, and again, not a lot of vertical, so I don't know if I just caught a good time frame there where the wind wasn't really pushing me around too much. These were the first 2 shots, and then I think the third one was up here, and the fourth one, then I started getting pushed around out to there. But even with that, the overall aggregate was 0.775 inches, so just over 3/4, which works out to 0.37 MOA. A lot of guys would look at that and say, well, I'm done. You know, you're shooting a 1/3 MOA in the wind at 200 yards with virtually no load development. Just a pressure ladder, pick a spot, go test it at 200, and ta-da. That's pretty good. So I ended up, after I shot at the range that day, I ended up taking this load and shooting it at our local varmint match, and it shot pretty good. It seemed like it needed to warm up before it shot well, where in this instance, you know, this was kind of I shot the Fowlers. These Fowlers, that's 5 shots, and that happened to be this load. So this load is on here twice. I shot the Fowlers, then shot these, and I was cooling the barrel with the chamber chiller in between groups, and then I went over to this one, but I'm sure there was still some residual heat in the barrel after 10 rounds being fired. I wasn't letting it sit for more than a few minutes. So it shot at the varmint match. It shot okay. It was a cold day. It seemed like it needed to warm up, and then I had 8 rounds left after the varmint match, and I went to our 100-yard range and shot those. And the first shot jumped up high, and the second shot was in the center. Third one was next to that, and then there was 5 shots in the same hole. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all in the same hole, and I think I'll put a still of that up on the screen here so you can see. And that was at 100 yards, so that load, once it warmed up, it absolutely hammered and just kept pounding them in the same hole. But here's the caveat, is then I took those 8 rounds, all the rounds I shot at the varmint match, all these rounds, and I decapped them using a Lee universal decapping die. And unfortunately, the primers came out a little easier with there was a little less resistance to get them out than anything else we shot for this test. So I'm afraid this charge is a little on the hot side. I didn't see any pressure signs on the brass itself, but being that these primers came out easier than any of the rest of them, I think we're going to have to, if we pursue this, we're going to have to let that load down a little bit to save some brass life. But anyway, small detour there. I just wanted to let you guys know that although this shoots really good, I think we're going to have to change it. And then N540, the first charge, 28.46 grains. It didn't track the first round. The lab radar didn't track the first round for some reason. But the subsequent 4 rounds had an SD of 1.9 and an ES of 5. That's really, really, really good. Now, does that mean it's going to shoot great at distance? Maybe, maybe not, but that's kind of what guys go for, is those really low velocity numbers. So I think at least we should maybe test this load at distance and see, how it shoots for us in our rifle under the conditions out there. But the aggregate 1.140, and which translates into 0.54 MOA, so still really good. A lot of horizontal here, which is likely mostly tied to wind. It was only 0.555 on the vertical, so just over a 1/2 inch of vertical, or a 1/4 MOA of vertical, however you want to look at that, which is pretty minimal. And then we also tested a second charge weight of N540, just 28.94 grains, and that shot surprisingly similar. The velocity metrics weren't quite as good. SD was 5.2, ES was 15, so that's still really good, but not quite as good as this last one. Aggregate was 1.025 inches, which is still half MOA. And then vertical was 0.59, so a little bit more vertical than this last one, but this group landed at 0.49 MOA. So again, super good. We have 3 what I would call pretty killer loads here. And then moving on to CFE 223, velocity metrics for that were average to poor. Really good on the vertical though, only 0.400 on the vertical. It's just sub-quarter MOA of vertical. So that one, you know, if you went out and shot long range on a windy day and it continued this trend, it'd probably hold pretty short vertical at distance, but it looked like you're getting pushed around more than you'd expect as far as left and right. That one, the ag was, I think this was the worst ag of the day because of this one. It was 2.050 inches. So just over 2 inches for the aggregate, which works out to 0.98 MOA. So this was the worst one of the day. Just snuck in under that 1 MOA. And again, only 0.400 of vertical. And then Superformance, much like on the 75 grain load, it looks like it was trying to shoot. I think these were the first 3, and then the 4th and 5th came out here. Could one of those be me? Yeah. Were 2 of them me? I don't think so. I think, again, we could maybe try tuning these out with seating depth. If we wanted to pursue that further, the velocity metrics, as you can see, were average, 11.4 SD, ES at 32, aggregate was 1.495 inches, which works out to 0.71 MOA. So overall, really good. You know, the guys that that are national level competitors, they wouldn't call any of these that great, except for maybe this one. But for the average person, these are really good. I think if guys could shoot sub MOA, and you know, I think 5 of the 11 groups, so we tested 11 loads across the 2 bullet weights. I think 5 of the 11 were 0.55 MOA or less. That's really good considering you saw the extent of my load development. I did a pressure ladder with 1 shot at each charge weight. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it up in the corner. That was part 4. 1 shot at each charge weight, and then just from my experience and what I was seeing on paper, I just picked a spot and said, okay, we're going to load up 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of these, and so on. And that was the extent of the load development. I went and shot them at 200 yards, and these are the results. So pretty good. And next, I think what we're going to do is maybe try testing some of these, probably not the Varga, but maybe test some of these at distance. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we'll see what Dale wants to do. We might, rather than pursuing the loads further, because we end up, in the end, we want this product to have, we're thinking it's going to be a 28-inch barrel. Right now we're at 31, so we don't want to spend too much time doing load development at 31, because that doesn't, if we get a good load at 31, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to shoot when we crop the barrel to 28 inches. So we don't want to waste too many resources at this length, because we're not going to have it at this length in the end. So might test a little more at 31, might crop it to 28, and then go back to factory ammo, see how that shoots at 100, see how it shoots at 640, and then also play with these loads some more. And really tune them down to as well as we can within reason before we do a lot more testing. So thanks for following along. Hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. I am still checking on all the comments and responding to everybody. I do appreciate your feedback. We're trying to find a sweet spot between having longer videos and shorter videos. If you guys have any feedback on that, if you like the longer format, or if you like them shorter, let me know. I know time is valuable, and I'm just trying to give you guys as much information as possible. So, and I can be a little long-winded, so these videos end up getting a little longer than we might like them, but trying to make them information dense. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Like this video, share it with any of your friends that might find it interesting. and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.